That's a really interesting, statement that you say. Because what I read about in Vietnam was it's the second largest producer of food waste within the region, second behind China.
In Australia, just to give you an example, $36 billion worth of food goes to waste every year. 36 billion.
Oh.
When we've got so many people going hungry,
Yeah.
right? And around the world, it's like it equates to about 30% of all food produced goes to waste.
I traded my
Treat 'em good.
lunches.
You traded yours in?
Yeah.
My
For
kid will only
Natural wine and cheese.
No.
Vegemite sandwich. Get out.
Welcome, Louise.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for
shouldn't say
coming.
welcome.
Thank you for taking. I know you have a busy schedule right now, so thank you for taking time
Pleasure.
and joining us today. I guess first and foremost, I don't want to do the whole introduce yourself. So we already did the introduction, but I also really want to talk about VietHarvest and why you're in Vietnam right now. So do you want to tell us about VietHarvest?
Sure. So VietHarvest is a social enterprise. We rescue good quality surplus food from different food businesses like hotels, catering companies, manufacturers, wherever we can find quality surplus food that would otherwise go to waste, and we deliver that to charities and underserved communities.
Amazing. So VietHarvest started from OzHarvest. So how did the whole OzHarvest, VietHarvest come about? Because you're Vietnamese heritage, born and raised in Sydney. So how did you find your way to, I want to do this in Vietnam?
Good question. How can I answer this in a short amount of time?
You can take all day if you want.
Well, I came across the incredible force, visionary, inspiring woman that is Ronnie Khan. And she's the founder and CEO of OzHarvest. And she actually created OzHarvest 20 years ago in Australia.
Wow, that long.
Actually, that
It-
long.
it's more like I'm getting that old.
So 20 years ago, I'll give you a bit of history about OzHarvest, if
please.
that's cool, because that will give a little bit of context. So 20 years ago, she was actually in the events industry, and she saw the amount of food that she was creating as an event producer. So copious amounts of food, all for her clients, and they would be interested in eating a little bit of it, going to the bar
Yeah.
and not coming back to the food table. So she found herself with so much food at the end of the event, and she wanted to know where she could place that food. After a bit of research, she actually couldn't find an easy solution. So what she would do is take that food from her events and actually deliver it to the local homeless shelter in Sydney. And that kind of was the catalyst for this concept of food rescue. Fast forward a few months and maybe years of research on her end. Actually, it probably took a little shorter than that because Ronnie goes at full speed.
I heard about this.
Yeah,
She's full.
she full
Yeah.
speed. When she knows what she wants, she will make it happen.
Yeah.
She's an action person. So OzHarvest was created, and it started off with her putting food in the back of her car,
Oh, wow.
delivering that to charities. And she brought people on board. She got lawyers together, changed the law in Australia to allow food donors to give
Yeah.
away the food without fear of liability, without
Right.
fear, because there was an education piece
Yeah.
that needed to happen. So that's where it started.
Yeah.
And then I met Ronnie Khan in 2010. What year are we now? 13 years ago.
13 years ago.
So 2010, met Ronnie Khan through some work I was doing, and I supported OzHarvest work through promoting media, public relations, marketing for a couple of years before I actually joined OzHarvest full time.
Yeah, right.
I wanted to work for purpose, wanted to do something good, make some impact, and Ronnie said, "Why don't you join us?"
Have you always been doing those types of work growing up or while you're studying type of thing?
I think community was always something that I really did as a young kid, like being involved in, the Vietnamese community. So, I grew
Well,
up in Western Sydney.
Sydney is very different to Brisbane.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think
True.
there's only Bao in Brisbane.
Really good point.
probably.
Really good point. I grew up in one of the most Vietnamese communities in Australia.
Yeah.
Right, Bankstown, there's Cabramatta,
Yeah.
there's Bankstown. I'm a Bankstown girl. And in that community, I used to do some martial arts called Vovinam, Vietnamese martial
right.
arts. Yeah. Watch out.
Yeah.
I actually saw a Vovinam sign on
Yeah.
the way here. So I did that. That was really much community focused. It was
Yeah.
about coming together, about doing things for each other, hosting events. And that kind of kicked off a bit of my interest in
Yeah.
community. I think it also comes from your values, your
Yeah.
parents, what values they teach you in the home. And so I was always interested in charity work or community work, and I didn't do that as my first job.
Yeah.
Coming out of uni, like I worked for massive food corporations,
So the opposite end, different spectrum.
different spectrum.
Yeah.
So for a few years, doing a lot of the communications and the marketing and branding and storytelling for massive brands, from wine brands to beer brands to chocolate brands to lots of the FMCGs, so fast moving consumer goods brands. And it was fun.
Yeah.
It was good. Learned a lot, but there was something missing.
Right.
But what's it like actually just like taking that step to go do your own thing? So, you're kind of under the shelter. You work for a big company and then you start to take that step, and Ronnie's kind of pointing towards this. What's it like taking that step?
Oh, it's a hard choice to make when you are just starting your career. I think a lot of people, when they start their career in, say, the corporate sector, there is a lot of razzle-dazzle there. Lots of awesome events, lots of huge budgets to spend, especially in the marketing space. And there's a lot of razzle-dazzle and glitter and shiny, and it's, you can go down that path and continue climbing up the corporate ladder. But for me, something didn't feel 100% right. And that's me.
Yeah.
For others, it's a chance for them to work and move around within that big corporation and then have chance to go and be posted overseas, for example, because they are multinationals, they're international companies. But then I get the pull and I get a glimpse of what it feels like to help people. And I think for me, personally, that overshadows the razzle-dazzle glitter of everything. When you actually get a chance to witness how you make people feel
Yeah.
by giving them food
Yeah.
that would otherwise go to waste, and how grateful that simple meal is, or that apple or the banana, or food that they can't afford, they can't access.
Brown bananas are the best.
Banana bread.
Exactly.
Love banana bread.
Exactly.
It is a bit of a food podcast, so we're gonna do some food references sometimes, but
What, man?
but we also want to talk about
Just dropping facts.
when did that stage where you're like, okay, you've been at Oz Harvest for a decade. When did that vision of coming to Vietnam come about? Was it always in the back of your mind you wanted to come here and do something?
Gosh, no. It sort of organically happened. A few years into working at Oz Harvest, the United Nations started to set really big targets to raise awareness around food waste reduction. So just to give you guys an example, if food waste were a country, it would be the third highest greenhouse gas emitter after
Holy.
US and China, if food waste alone were a country.
Wow.
So the UN and all of their amazing researchers and scientists and very intelligent people, when they pulled together the facts, they wanted those facts to be shared across the world. And Oz Harvest at the time we were doing kind of cool things around getting the message out there around reducing food waste. What we didn't realize, I suppose, was the impact of food waste on climate change. So, coming back to your question, we were asked to go and do multiple events overseas, so in Peru, in Thailand, to raise awareness about food waste.
Yeah.
And that's when I got the taste of what it's like to share the model globally.
Yeah.
Sharing the model in Peru, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Sharing the model in Thailand, what does that look like? It's a really simple concept of taking what you've got over here, which is surplus, and then connecting it over here with people in need.
Yeah.
That's when it started, the thought
Right.
around sharing the model globally,
Yeah.
for me personally anyway. And then some inquiries from Vietnam started coming through, just
nice.
really organically.
Yeah.
Inquiries about, hey, we read about your model,
Yeah.
we heard about it. How do we get this happening in Vietnam?
It's incredible.
How do we get this happening in the Philippines or in Bali or wherever it was in the world? So that's where it started. That sort of seed was planted for me.
What I'm kind of curious though, is food waste different in each country? Because to me, I would think of like Asia or Vietnam, the food waste would look completely different here compared to Australia, or completely different here compared to Lima or Thailand. Is there a difference in like the type of food waste or what it looks like? Or like
Yeah.
what you have to teach?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So in Australia, we waste 50% of the food we waste in Australia comes from households. And 20 to 30% comes from the farms. And then in between, you've got the rest of the supply chain.
That's a really interesting, statement that you say, because what I read about in Vietnam was it's the second largest producer of food waste within the region, second behind China.
Which is crazy because I don't think of food waste here, but
Yeah, because there's this notion of, we don't waste anything.
right, we
But-
go to market and you see everybody buying and using every single piece of
But
meat or whatever.
The stat is actually from the poor handling and the storage and distribution of all the produce being grown. So it's like to answer what you're saying, it's a different type of food waste, and it's something that maybe people aren't aware about. So we gotta
We are at the
talk about it.
beginning of the journey of education here. So while we started the education process 20 years ago in Australia, we've come really far in Australia, but we also have such a long way to go. In Australia, we've got really good statistics, really good research, a really good understanding of the baseline
Yeah.
of how much we waste
Yeah.
and where do we waste. I think in Asia, perhaps more research can be done.
Yes.
Universities can do it, researchers can do it. Start to focus on where that waste occurs.
Yeah.
So we will have some varied pieces of information, but I do think you're right. The storage, the handling, the logistics,
Yeah.
and on farm, I think waste will happen, undoubtedly along the supply chain.
You can never go to a zero factor. You can, but you can you
work towards halving it.
exactly, or it's more like there's no proper solution to it, but can we actually try to do it? 100%.
Got to start somewhere.
Got to start somewhere for sure. And another interesting, I don't know how accurate the stat is, but I've sort of been able to experience this firsthand because I was able to work in some rice farms and some tomato farms. More than half of that, what's actually being planted or produced, doesn't actually even make it to market. Like I just see tons of tomatoes just in this field, and I ask him like, why can't what's wrong with it? I was like, well, the market can't accept it,
Right.
and it's sort of like past a certain season or something like that, and there's not enough logistics for people to pick it up. So that just sits there. It doesn't even become compost. It just burns, or they don't really make they. There's no infrastructure there for them. Or there's no, I guess, I don't know if the education is there yet to show them how to, if those tomatoes, you can make tomato sauce, passata or something like that. But for them, it's also a lot of work,
Yep.
and they're not going to benefit from that. So I don't know how the
How do you
system.
balance
How
that?
do you
Yeah.
balance it? Yeah.
Look, I think again, it's everyone's responsibility, right? It's
Yeah.
really easy for all of us to go, oh, it's their fault. It's
Yeah.
the supermarket's fault. It's the farmer's fault.
Yeah.
Actually, you got fingers pointing back at you as a consumer.
Yeah.
Like think about when you go and do your shop.
Yeah.
We might be more conscious because we are in the food industry, but when you go to that, shop and you look for the most perfect apple or the most, I'm wondering, do you buy the brown banana or do you buy the banana that's perfectly yellow?
I hate green perfect bananas. It needs to be like speckled or like starting to brown and like really
See,
kind of like.
you are like an anomaly, right? Everyone else will look for the other perfect
Yeah.
banana.
I
If you
think
eat green bananas,
to
you're
be honest, this is one of the reasons why it's somewhat left the food and beverage world for a little bit, because as chefs or as restaurateurs, we have to get the best products. Those brown speckled bananas, we're not going to choose that because we need the better products to be able to sell it. So that's why I always think restaurants are part of the broken system.
But I mean, maybe the education comes, this may be something you've learned, that maybe the non-perfect fruit or vegetable or whatever actually makes the dish you're trying to make more delicious, because you need that overripeness, you need that sweetness, or you maybe need something like that.
But bananas is one example.
One example.
Yeah, but there's like, tomatoes. You
Yeah.
want that most perfectly ripe tomato that you can slice properly. You don't want like something that's like a little bit crooked or something like that.
Right, but couldn't like an overripe one make like a good sauce or a bolognese?
But because the restaurant is operating at such a fast pace that all that time that you're gonna spend on that, you're like, nah, I can't.
It's not worth it.
I got to do something else.
Okay,
Yeah.
just curious. Yeah.
Again, it's up to everyone, right? When you're the consumer, what can you do as a consumer to waste less? So instead of wasting the little things in the bottom of your fridge, try and turn it into something, try and use it up. For example, as a chef, you guys have a role to use everything
most definitely,
in your restaurant, or even as a role to educate your customers.
Yeah.
So, putting something on the menu that might not normally be a perfect dish. It could have a story behind it of sustainability, of a small scale grower, for example, or of a zero waste dish.
Yeah.
Like those are the types of things as a chef you have the power and the influence to kind of tell that story in a different way.
Most definitely we do. But it's also, that's a chef can only do so much. It's also the consumerism. They've got to accept that what the story the chef is trying to do on a regular basis is acceptable to them. They're like, why do I want to pay more for something that's a product that's maybe considered subpar to I want to buy that perfectly grown whatever and cook with that so they can charge more? Because at the end of the day, this price point has a huge part to do with how chefs operate as well.
Yeah.
And when you apply that to the farm, it's the same problem, right?
Yeah.
So the farm can only sell the perfect things because the consumer is looking for the perfect thing. So I think as a system, we need to think about it as a system, our ecosystem, our food system. In Australia, just to give you an example, $36 billion worth of food goes to waste every year. 36 billion when we've got so many people going hungry, right? And around the world, it's like it equates to about 30% of all food produced goes to waste.
Is there any farming methods that could make this better, like whether it be vertical farming or any system of farming that could help this?
I think there's some real innovation happening in that space when it comes to food production. When you think of throwing away, like let's just say the tomato, you're throwing away the energy, the water, whatever it took, the labor to produce that tomato. There's a company here in Vietnam actually called Orla, and they are a vertical farm that only uses 1% of the input that is required to produce a tomato.
Oh, nice.
So thinking about the food system is how can we be more innovative and take care of the planet better to produce the food that we need.
Because I think of all that waste as, you may think of the food that you're throwing away, but you got to think of all the water and everything you've used and the energy and whatever tools you've used, like the gas, everything you've done to just pollute the earth, let's throw into this, and then you're going to take this viable energy source and throw it away.
Totally. And then that food sitting there rotting is actually called methane. And that's even more harmful than just your regular carbon.
So what is there an option for the farmers? So maybe a consumer comes, they take their best produce. What's going on with the produce that's not taken, that's not perfect, it's a little...
Well, at the moment, unless there's a market for it, unless there's demand, that produce will sit there. So it's like, how can we as consumers, and this is the stuff that we want to solve, it's the stuff that VietHarvest and VietHarvest in whatever country wants to solve. So if we can kind of entice people to buy a product for good, for example, knowing that passata, let's just say it's a VietHarvest passata, is sold instead of, of your regular mass-made passatas, then you're just changing the kind of supply and demand. But I think consumers, farmers, restaurateurs, chefs, businesses, we all have some sort of role to play. Otherwise, we'll continue on this cycle of food production and waste that will not, that will not be good for the planet or for people.
Yeah.
And this is kind of what your role is. You're taking your childhood, you grew up in this community, and so now you're trying to take other communities and connect them, right?
Yeah, I think we see VietHarvest or this model as a connector. What we do is, yes, at the most basic level, we connect the food business, and we're the intermediary that collects the food, and then we give it to the people who need it, the end underserved communities. But beyond that, we actually play a huge role in education. So like this weekend, we're having an event.
Yes.
It's going to bring so many businesses together. It's going to bring CEOs, top business decision makers together to really understand what this problem is. And then the message will be, work with us. Let's work together to solve it. Because we can't do it alone. Like, there's no way a little charity or a little social enterprise can fix this problem. But we can start somewhere. Just like what you said, we've got to start somewhere. The more and more we say, oh, that's too big a problem, is makes it so hard.
Got to try.
Gonna be too late.
Yep.
So
totally.
more about the event happening this weekend. It's a CEO Cookoff. So the premise is it started off in Australia, obviously. You've invited 50 really cool CEO. I don't want to say cool, but like known
the chefs
CEOs.
are cool.
Do you know them?
Yeah, I don't know who I'm going to be cooking with yet, but
Sell out.
he's always going
Trying to get the next
So
job.
50 CEOs are going to team up with 10 chefs that you've selected from Vietnam and Australia.
Yeah.
And you want to tell us more about the event?
Yeah, cool. So it's a concept that, again, cool ideas from Australia, bring it over here, replicate it, and give it its own little twist. So the CEO Cook-Off, I think on Sunday, so taking place at Intercontinental Saigon, we've got chefs flying in from Australia, Tommy Pham from MasterChef, T. Lee from Jiao in Melbourne, and Hanoi chefs, Chef Hieu, Chef Tu, and the Saigon
Very cool
chefs.
lineup.
Yeah, a really cool lineup of chefs who are really, what we wanted was chefs who are passionate.
Yeah.
Like, we wanted chefs who actually believe authentically in what we do. Because, again, they have the power to change, including this guy right here. Big supporter. Huge thanks.
No, please.
And they're gonna boss the bosses around, right? So the bosses of big companies. We've got the bosses of some really big companies.
That's what I can't wait for, just to see this.
Yeah, like literally, can you chop some parsley?
Yeah.
Can you stir this pot?
Rushing, because it's a short amount of time. I think there's only about 45 minutes to an hour to cook an entree and a main. So
I hope you hired a good medical team.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of cuts.
Oh my God. No fingernails in soup, please. So it's going to be really fun, dynamic. We don't like the sit-down gala dinners.
Yeah.
It's kind of a bit boring. So this is really like interactive. And actually, the guests will be charity leaders, social impact leaders, change makers. We wanted to bring that community together with the corporate community, because we know that for all the things we do, we need money. We need funding, we need money, we need to pay people, we need to provide a service that's reliable, and we want the business community to see that, and we add value. We add so much value to their business as well.
What better way than to connect than over a meal too?
definitely. That's why food just brings everyone together, right?
Totally.
I want to touch on so I've been able to work with you on this project for the last couple of months, and you're seriously, you're a badass. Like, how are you? Obviously, you're raising a family, but you're doing projects in Australia, and I saw you doing other projects in other countries, and you're trying to do it in Vietnam. Almost everywhere, you're always on a call, but you get shit done.
How much coffee do you drink? Damn.
Just 2 shots a day.
So how do you, like, I can only relate for myself when I say chefs, we don't get paid enough. There's no work-life balance, but we do it because there's a drive, there's a passion. So what's a day in the life of Louise Tran?
This is actually
Because
relaxing.
there's a lot you do.
I don't have 2 kids at my feet right now. I left them in Australia. So GSD, get shit done. I've got days where I just block out time to get shit done.
Yeah.
I need them. But a day looks like, my kids waking me up at 5:45 in the morning. asking me whether it's 6:00 yet so they can watch ABC Kids. I've got a 6-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And I get them to school like any other parent. You know, as working parents, you just kind of, you do what you need to get the kids to school, get them fed, and then you start your work. And, you know, in Australia, yes, I work for VietHarvest, and we're doing some really cool innovation, really cool things around the innovation space, around really scaling up food waste reduction. And so that's sort of what I'm involved in and interested in at this minute. You know, I've gone from marketing to pulling on events and sort of being a jack of all trades. I'm a bit of a generalist, but I kind of love that.
Badass.
And
Actually,
now
you're a badass.
I've never been called that, a compliment, I guess. And then on top of that, I think VietHarvest is just one of those things that once you start something, I just need to see it through and need to see what it can do here in Vietnam. Like you, I'm Vietnamese, Australian-born, proud, have parents who came to Australia in the 70s and grew up as a different kid.
Yeah.
You know, I was a bit different. You know, in the 80s, you sort of, you bring your rice to school or whatnot, and
Broken rice, right?
Pardon?
It had to be broken rice, right?
No, not broken rice.
I brought broken rice too.
I wish I got broken rice with the pork chop on the side.
I got that. I brought that.
I give that to my
But
kid
actually,
now.
I traded my
Treat 'em good.
lunches.
You traded yours in?
Yeah.
My
For
kid
like
will only
Natural wine and cheese?
No.
Vegemite sandwich. Get out. You're dead
I
to me.
kid you not.
Oh,
Well, I didn't really get that at home. Like, Mom's going to be like, what the hell's a Vegemite sandwich?
You're like, I'll give you my shrimp paste for your Vegemite.
we were talking about Mum Rook and Mum Thumb yesterday. So
Yep.
can we go there at some point and tell me the difference? Because I don't know the difference between the two.
Yes.
Okay.
He's
Next.
probably got to be better. He's like,
But how do I manage it? Look, it's busy, but I've got support. I'm lucky. I've got mum and dad in Australia nearby. I've got my in-laws nearby, and I just love what I do. So I do spend probably too much time working, but it's not work when you really love it. But it is work, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't. Yeah.
amazing. Because, there's, I think it was just yesterday we had meetings and meetings and meetings, and just your patience within some of those meetings, and then they go on, and then you have to move on to another. I guess you got to meet sponsors, and then you always, I guess, as a social enterprise, you got to somehow meet people so you can raise money to do more projects. It's crazy the amount of work you got to do.
There's a lot to starting something.
Yeah.
Like, you guys know that with starting a restaurant, you just compare the things you need to do to pull a restaurant together. And if you apply that to a social enterprise, we need good people.
Right.
We need good partners. And yesterday I have to pinch myself because we launched a freaking massive partnership with Vietnam Airlines and
I saw that.
Intercontinental Hotels Group. And it's our first year here of operating. And, I think, so we need all of the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yep.
And when you're first starting, you do feel like you're doing everything to just pull together the foundations. But when you lay the foundations and you make the foundations strong, it kind of just does the work itself. But I know there's a good sort of 3 years before the foundations are really solid.
Yeah.
And the thing that we're lucky with is that we attract some really incredible people. So Ronnie always says we're a magnet for magnificent people. That's how you came on board. And agreed to all of the
we came
things
on board
that
because we have a mutual friend that I used to go out
Shout
partying.
out Colin Foong.
Yeah, he introduced us. But just touching on all that fundraising and sponsors and partners, yesterday's, it was like a full press conference with Vietnam Airlines. So what's some of the challenges or like differences that you see while you're trying to start VietHarvest in Vietnam?
So we're talking about the press conference or in general?
Both?
The challenges in Vietnam, I think, come back to what we were talking about before, is the awareness, right? It took a good many years before Australia even knew what food rescue was, or what we were doing at VietHarvest. You know, it's so in Vietnam we're starting from scratch. And especially an international concept kind of landing in a country that operates like so differently from Australia. It's like aliens have landed and now they're talking about food rescue. What are you talking about? So I think the biggest challenge is the awareness. How do we educate business? How do we educate individuals? And you do that really slowly, but you do that with real, clear messaging, right? Yeah. Clear communication. That's the stuff that I take from the old days of corporate work. But, if you have your clear vision and you want people to come along on that journey, we're here to serve people. We're here to nourish Vietnam. We're here to provide food to people in need. Yeah. We're here to reduce food waste. Yeah. It's kind of simple. And so when you do start to have those conversations, it starts to make sense to people, and then it starts to make sense to companies. Yeah. So yesterday's press conference was something I'd never experienced before. In Australia, having worked in media and PR and the traditional sense, you send out a press release, you send out a press pack, you send out some nice gifts, and you might get a story, You might get some earned publicity. You build those relationships. But in Vietnam, it's kind of a cool experience, actually. Yeah. We're working with these major companies here, and it was like we were like the Prime Minister delivering a press conference. There was like 20 media sitting down, listening to every word, us sharing what we do, why we do it, the story behind VietHarvest, and lots of photos, lots of photos. And there's a real formality to the way press conferences are run in Vietnam. Yeah. So it made it quite a novelty for me to witness it and be involved in that and be sitting at that table like I was someone, super important and, sitting at that table
you are
next to the, Australian Deputy Consul General. And, but it was about bringing all these people together. And then the media's role is to share that message. Yeah. It was quite interesting to see all of the photos and the published articles last night. It's all in Vietnamese, so I couldn't read it. So I hope that they, I guess shared our story.
Google Translate.
Yeah, there you go. Google Translate. No, I think Vietnam's a great country for doing this because, in my experience, like Vietnam's one of the countries that cares most about helping its other citizens.
Yeah.
I mean, during lockdowns, people from like the countryside would send food to people who lived in Saigon because they couldn't go outside their homes or anything. Like, if there's people that care about their other citizens or fellow citizens, it's Vietnam. So I think this will have like a big impact on Vietnam.
Totally agree. Like, and you feel that in the Vietnamese community as well. I think the values of just helping one another is like in the DNA of Vietnamese people.
So I guess we have the CEO Cookoff on the weekends. What's the next steps for VietHarvest in Vietnam?
So in Hanoi, we've been operating since, I'd say June last year was when we launched. And then August was when we did our first food rescue. And in Ho Chi Minh City, or Saigon, we started rescuing food 2 weeks ago and have, in those 2 weeks, which is really 9 days, Phu Ngan Ngo, our Ho Chi Minh City manager, has distributed 1,500 meals to charities and children. Like, nice. That's 9 days.
Yeah.
1,500?
Yeah.
1,500.
Oh, wow. 9 days.
In 9 days. And, I mean, it's just a number, but the thing with VietHarvest is you can see the impact. Yeah. It's food, and I went to see one of the vans yesterday collecting food from the hotels. Yeah. And one of our first food donors is 4Ps Pizza. Incredible organisation.
Thank you, 4Ps.
Thanks, 4Ps. You're awesome. And then Intercontinental Hotels came on board, first food donors. And these are really big companies with big, credible brands and really care about the communities that they operate in as well. So I saw the bags of like really good quality meats, some mushrooms, broccoli. Like, it's just really good quality stuff. And you know that when you turn that into a meal for some children in an orphanage or for the charities that we're delivering to, you know how much happiness comes with that. You can't measure the happiness. You can't measure the smiles. You can't measure the joy.
Yeah.
And so I think that's damn special.
Yeah.
And so what next is just more of that,
Yeah.
more of that goodness, like delivering more of that goodness. You know, you should get out in one of the trucks and go rescue
definitely.
some food one day. Well, we've only got one truck at the moment. But yeah, like that's the joy.
Yeah.
That's
So you mentioned some reputable companies, and obviously you, at a stage, we would move on to, I guess, supermarkets would
Yeah.
be, because that's another supply chain that has a lot of waste.
100%. So any supermarket chains out there
Yeah.
looking at you. No, we are talking with a few, and it's a process
Yeah.
of education. So you can imagine any big company, there's a lot of hoops
Yeah.
to go through
Yeah.
to ensure that we can prove
Yeah.
that we're credible, reliable,
Yeah.
trustworthy. We've got 20 years of experience in Australia
Yeah.
backing us. So in Vietnam, it's just beginning that journey and making sure that people feel comfortable with their food going to VietHarvest
Yeah.
and then giving that food to people in need. But with supermarkets, we see huge opportunity to
Yeah.
collect, help them reduce their food waste,
Yeah.
but then give some really nutritious food to some of the charities that
Yeah.
we're helping.
And then you mentioned that Ronnie had to change some laws because there's liabilities. Is that something that you guys would have to cross over here as well, or?
I think it's probably a little bit different in Vietnam. The
Yeah.
legal system is really complex,
Yeah.
but you know, when we take the food, we take the responsibility
Yeah,
to
okay.
give that food out,
Yeah.
make sure that it's safe.
Yeah.
So we take the drivers that we train through the food safety training that we do in Australia. So we want to make sure that food safety comes first, that the quality comes first,
Yeah.
and that if it's food that you and I won't eat, we don't collect it.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of simple sometimes
Yeah.
as well to go back to those basic
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
that are, you know, on a massive scale, that's harder. You do need the process, but really, if it's something that you and I wouldn't eat,
Yeah.
we just won't collect it. So we need to make sure that there's quality. We work with the partners to ensure that it's all safe. And then, yeah, the food we've seen so far is really pretty cool, pretty such good quality.
Yeah, got that good produce here.
So yeah, I think with any listeners that we have, I'm gonna put the websites on
Yeah, for sure.
we have our platforms up and ready,
Stop looking at me about that.
because that's your job, bro.
Man, it is done. It is here. Okay.
VietHarvest.com. So if you want to be a food donor, a volunteer, or I guess donate,
Yeah.
just follow the links. Click on the website,
Click,
and then
donate food, donate time, donate money.
Those
really
are three
easy.
things, right?
Yeah.
I guess just to finish up, what are some tips that people, regular average Joes or Jills at home could, think about when they're grocery shopping or cooking a meal? Do you have any tips that you use at home to
Well,
reduce food waste?
I brought a prop.
Oh yes, I forgot about this. one,
Developed
sorry.
in Australia.
Welcome to today's sponsor.
So
Just
no,
kidding.
I was gonna ask you about this one.
Again, Oz Harvest is pretty cool. Like we just come up with some stuff that's pretty interesting. So this is called Use It Up tape.
Yeah.
Like there's a whole bunch of research done into how do we get us, the consumer, to waste less at home.
Yeah.
Waste less at home, and you can have apps, you can have reminders, you can have things that are digital and tracking, but sometimes the simplest things work, right? So this is actually tape, which I'll leave here with you, Bao, that you just peel it off, stick it in your fridge like a little shelf,
Yeah.
and then put the things that you've made in the last few days in this little use it up corner, for example, to make sure
okay.
that you're going through your fridge and eating all of the leftovers that you
Yeah.
cooked. Or you can stick it on for your housemates, for example, if you want them to eat that container first. Just sorry, kidding.
Just like
Eat that
just
pan
little
over there.
reminders.
stuff that's going
like,
bad, just put it right here.
there.
Oh, wow,
And
I'm
like-
going back. Oh,
Like
eat me
just
up.
that's that's a banana. Just stick it there.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's just visual reminder so that when you're at home and you're like, not sure what to eat first or
Yeah.
not sure what
Yeah.
what's still good, just use it up.
You don't get
That's
that damn apple that goes to the back of the fridge where you're like 3 weeks later, like, there you are.
There you are.
Son of a bitch.
So that's the simplest thing to do. And just like, just find creative ways to use everything in the bottom of your crisper. I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure why I use the word crisper. It's like the bottom of your fridge. Curries, turn it into fried rice, you know, like just maybe you can share some recipes for people to use it up.
That's something I do want to do more of. I was doing that a lot when I was in Dalat, just doing like food waste recipes. 'Cause I was just by myself. I wasn't really, I know I was having time in my life, but life has gotten the best of me, to be honest. There's been so much going on, but it's something I would really want to get back into.
Yeah, well, we can have some Baola use it up recipes
Yeah, that sounds good.
translated to Vietnamese.
No, but you know,
His price is
Oz
high.
Harvest is something I've always wanted to be a part of. But when I was living in Sydney, I was a junior chef. I wasn't obviously allowed, or I guess invited, to go to those cook-offs and whatnot.
hierarchical. Sorry.
But then I was in Hong Kong for a few years, and then over here, then Colin reached out to me as, hey, you know, do you remember Louise, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yes. Like, how do I do this? How do we become involved?
Perfect.
And then, you gave me a call and
Sold it.
it was an easy sell.
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. This guy's just awesome. Like, you know, in the beginning, the other thing you need to start something up is just people believing in what you're trying to do.
Right.
Because I don't have any money to pay this guy. You know, like it's literally
It's all volunteer
love
work,
for
everyone.
volunteering, for the purpose, for the love of it. And actually, I volunteer my time. This is me driving this from pure passion, from a place that, you know, my parents grew up just here and in the Mekong, and I have family in the north. Like, this is part of me. It's part of my blood. It's part of my heart. It's, you know, so I want my kids to kind of get that when they grow up, like have a sense of belonging to both Australia and Vietnam.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like this, the legacy of VietHarvest will hopefully just, you know, live on and on and on.
That was actually a good transition point, because I was curious, do you have any like words for anybody who maybe, you know, they want to chase their passion, or like if they're having like, they're trying to chase their passion, they're having those bad days and they're just like, they're losing that belief in themselves. Is there anything you tell yourself or you do that helps you keep you going?
I want to say cheerleaders.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you've got a couple of cheerleaders that will give you that belief, self-belief, confidence, energy, I think surround yourself with people who can be your cheerleaders, because they will help lift you when you feel like you're falling over a little bit.
Right.
Because I think when you work in the purpose space, you give so much of your time, your energy, your passion, that it can be draining in the most beautiful, positive way. It can be draining. So you've got to keep that real too. But if you've got people in your circle who really just can give you some of that energy when you need that energy, that will keep you going. And I've got some really amazing people. Can't name them all because I'll forget someone. But I love everyone who's given me that energy, and you know who you are.
I got to find my cheerleaders.
I'll be your cheerleader.
Thank you.
You can do it.
That's good. That's really good. I think that's very important. Like, get yourself with friends and keep going, because they're sure, like, it looks great because you've had like a lot of great response in Vietnam, but I'm sure there were a lot of hardships and a lot of failures along the way.
It's just taken a lot of time, you know, a lot of knockbacks, a lot of grants that never saw the light of day, that, you know, where I spent hours and hours and hours writing so many grant applications and just don't make the cut. Sorry, you're not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
And until you get that first person that believes in the vision and supports you, and it's the same with, you know, Ronnie's story. You know, it takes time, but when you get knocked down, just get back up again. I feel like we're going to break into song.
It's a great message.
GSD.
No, but that is true. I
Yeah.
can try to apply that myself too from now on.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's definitely hard when you do something like one time and you don't get that almost like instant gratification.
No.
Yeah. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, of course, you're seeing lots of success now, but I know on the back end, like, there's all those grants you wrote, there's always reaching out to people. I mean, you may have had 20 no's to the one yes, or even more no's.
So many no's. And so many, even bringing people on the journey, perhaps not the right people, you know, perhaps people who weren't in it for the right reason when you gave them the belief or the opportunity. So that's also a learning, you know, people who have now come into the world of VietHarvest. I can't believe like the people that we've been able to attract. It's really amazing.
Nice.
I think we can probably finish it up there. I think thank you, Louise, for coming and spending some time with us and sharing your story. I think you're one of the most remarkable person I've ever met, and I wish you so much success with especially VietHarvest and what you're trying to achieve. So I can't wait to see how it, I guess, grows and becomes a bigger and better thing.
You're such a badass cheerleader.
Thanks, cheerleader.
I'm trying to get that
Good job,
energy.
Good job, buddy.
I guess that's all we have for today.
Yeah, that'll
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you so much for your time. We know you're busy.
Thanks so much for having me and for springing on this whole setup. But it looks really cool and professional. So
We're trying to be.
We're trying. As you're talking to the man with the sticker on his face.
Eat me up. So that's it. We'll see you in the next
And
episode.
now we appreciate y'all for listening. We'll see ya.
Peace.